What's up, guys? Danny here from Geeks of Doom, and we are back with our MCU countdown rewatch on our way to Black Widow, which unfortunately, of course, was delayed until July 9th as opposed to May 7th, which would have ended our countdown perfectly, but such is life, right? Speaking of movies that we're all excited to see, family and I watched Godzilla vs. Kong yesterday, new on HBO Max. Thought I'd say just a few words about that because I feel that the MCU, doing this MCU rewatch, has in a way spoiled a lot of what I thought was going to be the positives of the MonsterVerse. Basically, for me, none of these MonsterVerse movies have worked. And I want to specify, I grew up renting the VHS tapes of all of the old Godzilla movies. I was so excited for Godzilla 2014. And each of the films, from Godzilla to Kong Skull Island, King of the Monsters, and now versus Kong, they've all disappointed me in multiple ways. And I see a lot of people reviewing them and saying, oh, I'm just being a cranky old man. I'm not. I'm 38 right now, so I'm not that old or cranky. But I see a lot of people like, well, why can't you just enjoy the big monsters going smash, smash and hitting each other and having a fight? Isn't that's all you're supposed to enjoy? But is it? Is that all we're supposed to enjoy? Because here's a franchise, the MCU, which, like Godzilla and King Kong, is dabbling in ideas that are decades old, lore and mythology that are decades old, and with dealing with massive special effects budgets, big-time casts full of tremendous acting talent, and somehow the MCU has made 23 good to classic films with human characters and character dialogue and investment that I care about, and balls to the wall crazy action sequences. The MonsterVerse just can't find the balance. And they have the effects. They have great acting. They have good directors. There's just something missing. And I know it's easy to say, just enjoy the monster go smashy smash. But not too long ago, we were calling movies like Guardians of the Galaxy a popcorn movie, but it stands the test of time. And I've rewatched Guardians of the Galaxy probably a dozen times. It never gets old. I'll rewatch this movie forever and ever. I watched Godzilla vs. Kong one time, and I can tell you, there is not a shot in hell that I'm going back to watch that ever again. Never going to watch Kong Skull Island again. Never going to watch Godzilla King of the Monsters again. Those were disposable, one-off, bad movies. I'm sorry. If you enjoy them, fantastic. Same thing with the MCU. Leave a comment. Tell me why I'm an idiot for not liking Godzilla vs. Kong. I will say, my wife got up in the middle of the movie and specifically told us, don't pause it. What part were we up to in the movie? Godzilla was fighting Kong, and she didn't care. My daughter, 10 years old, watches all of the Marvel movies, watches horror movies with me. My daughter was bored out of her mind during Godzilla vs. Kong. I can't even get the title of the movie right. Oh. But anyway, let's talk about a movie that we all enjoy. Guardians of the Galaxy from 2014. And if you don't believe me, Groot, hit the dancing. Yeah, it only took me about 8 McDonald's Happy Meals to get that one. Guardians of the Galaxy is written and directed by James Gunn, the man who single-handedly is about to save the Suicide Squad franchise after the absolute cluster muffin of the 2016 film, that god-awful abomination. He's about to save that. The trailer for the new Suicide Squad was released, and it looks off the chain. And I think a lot of people have complained, it just looks like an R-rated Guardians of the Galaxy. And most people I know are like, holy crap, this movie looks like an R-rated Guardians of the Galaxy. Well, here we are, the not R-rated actual Guardians of the Galaxy. I've been a huge James Gunn fan. This guy started in Troma, the Lloyd Kaufman Troma Studios. He went on to do the movie Slither, one of my favorite body horror comedies. That movie just celebrated its 15th anniversary the other day. And Guardians of the Galaxy, while it is not the best MCU film, it might be overall the most fun. And I think that's why most people love this movie. The cast has such great chemistry. You have Chris Pratt, who was hilarious in a supporting role on Parks and Rec, now gets to basically carry this new, B-level Marvel property as Peter Quill, Star-Lord. You get Zoe Saldana as Gamora. You get Dave Bautista, WWE Hall of Famer, or soon to be WWE Hall of Famer and former multiple-time world champion, as Drax the Destroyer. This movie helps catapult Dave Bautista into arguably the second biggest crossover wrestling star ever, after Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Because you think about people who have left the world of pro wrestling and entered into mainstream movies and entertainment. Obviously, if you're my age, you go back to Hulk Hogan and movies like No Holds Barred, Suburban Commando, Mr. Nanny, Thunder in Paradise. It didn't work out for Hulk Hogan. Not even Hulk Hogan. I mean, Rocky 3, yeah. But after that, Hulk Hogan was not a... He was a crossover star, but he was never able to make good movies. John Cena now is trying to get there, and he's in that new Suicide Squad movie. But even then, his parts in these movies are kind of supporting blockers, train wreck. He's got funny parts, but they're not the lead part. The movies he's made where he was the lead, The Marine, yeah. WWE Studios pumped out a bunch of crappy B-level, D-level movies with their potential wrestlers. Bautista hit the jackpot here, and he's turned it into a pretty damn good career. He got to work on Blade Runner 2049. He's in the new Dune movie coming out later this year. So he's the one, after The Rock, that really hit the jackpot. Who else do you got in there? You got, of course, the special effects of Rocket Raccoon, voiced by Bradley Cooper, and Groot. Dance for him, Groot. You have Groot, voiced by Vin Diesel, who does all of his iterations of I am Groot. And these really three actors on screen with their special effects counterparts. Sean Gunn, James Gunn's brother, does the motion capture for Rocket. And it's just the chemistry that these characters have. And the fun dialogue that James Gunn has. If you've watched his movies, you know the sense of humor he brings. And really, this movie does not take a long time. They're united together within the first 20 minutes of this movie. About 22 minutes in, they're united, and they are sent to the prison and the kiln, and that's where they bond together to form their alliance to escape. Nebula, I keep calling her Nebula, Gamora, is obviously a child of Thanos. Her and her sister Nebula, played by Karen Gillan, who would of course become a mainstay in the MCU franchise. They are working under Ronan the Accuser, a Kree warrior played by Lee Pace. My son thinks he's a very underrated villain in the MCU. I kind of view him as a little disposable. He makes a brief appearance later on in Captain Marvel, but he's just, a generic kind of Malekith in outer space type thing. And he's better than Malekith, but he doesn't do much for me in terms of, in terms of villainy. I don't rank him very high near the top. But again, this movie, more than almost any in the MCU, is not about having a great villain. It's about establishing this team. Because I grew up reading Marvel Comics, and I didn't really know much of the Guardians of the Galaxy. From reading the Infinity Gauntlet comic, that series, of course, I knew who Drax the Destroyer was. I knew who Nebula was. I knew who some of these characters were. Groot, I had heard about, Rocket, but I didn't know the Guardians of the Galaxy, and a lot of people didn't. This was like the biggest gamble that the MCU had taken. After the success of the Avengers, they were like, look, we just made 1.5 billion with the Avengers. You've never heard of Guardians of the Galaxy? Who cares? People will pay to see it. And they did. And this became an incredibly successful film and group. And it's mostly due to the chemistry that this team has, but it's also the supporting characters and the universe that we get to see, the cosmic Marvel universe here. There's a great scene on Nowhere, this floating celestial head where they go. The movie starts with Peter Quill, Star-Lord, finding this sphere, which houses this power source. We don't really know what it is yet. Turns out it is the Power Stone, the Infinity Stone. Ronan sends Gamora after it because he wants it, because with an Infinity Stone, he can crush the Skrulls and he can crush Xandar, the home of the Nova Corps, and basically start to take over the universe. He could also gain an upper hand on Thanos, who has lent out his daughters to Ronan to find the Power Stone for himself. The Guardians, once they're together, they realize they could take the Power Stone to the Collector, they could sell it, they can make a fortune. Benicio del Toro returns from his cameo in the post-credit scene of Thor: The Dark World, and things go wrong. Ronan ends up getting the Power Stone. The Guardians are in a position where they have to work together to stop him. Great supporting cast here. You got Michael Rooker as Yondu, who's so cool in this movie. I love his bow and arrow, or his arrow that he whistles and controls. John C. Reilly and Glenn Close have minor roles, but fun roles as members of the Nova Corps, Nova Prime. Glenn Close is Nova Prime. You get the first glimpse of Josh Brolin as Thanos. Very, very small. Like, they don't overdo it. If you're not a Marvel fan, if you don't know the Infinity Gauntlet, you might not have put two and two together. But the inner Marvel geeks like me and my friends, we're all sitting there going, oh, it's Thanos, Infinity Stones. Like, we're freaking out. And then, the next movie we're going to talk about is Age of Ultron, and the end credit scene there really amps that up to the next level. But yeah, this movie, I don't want to blabber on too long about it. It's just fun. Also, can't talk about this movie without the soundtrack. This movie is like Dazed and Confused, where the movie is great, the movie is entertaining, but the soundtrack in and of itself is a character in the movie. And that's part of Peter Quill, Star-Lord's character, is we open this film with this incredibly sad moment. All I've said is how much fun this movie is, but we open this movie with Quill and his family around his mother, who is dying of cancer. And she gives him one last gift, and then he basically runs out and is kidnapped by aliens. And then we zip forward years into the future, and he's Star-Lord. But he carries the cassette player with his awesome mix, Volume 1, and so many classic songs here. The movie opens with Come and Get Your Love, which he's singing while he's on the way to collect the sphere carrying the Power Stone. A scene that will be mimicked later on in Endgame. Of course, at the end, we get Ain't No Mountain High. We get so many great songs throughout. Hooked on a Feeling. Oh my God, the Hooked on a Feeling scene is one of the best scenes in the entire film. You have the scene where the Guardians are about to get away from the prison and Quill goes back just to get his tape recorder. So much fun. The soundtrack is an actual character in this movie. And it's so good. And then they would re-up that in part 2 because the soundtrack became so much more. Like I said, if you've seen Dazed and Confused, that's what the Guardian soundtrack feels like. But yeah, we get to eventually you have Ronan with the Power Stone on his big accuser hammer. The Guardians are able to break the stone out. And we've seen now that if a human being grabs the Power Stone, they're just going to explode. They can't handle it. Quill grabs it. The Guardians grab him. They form this link around the Power Stone. And somehow they're able to control it. And they kind of hint that because Quill was able to touch the Power Stone and not explode, that Quill is something more than just a regular human being. Of course, that's essentially, we find out all those answers in Guardians Volume 2. I won't spoil that yet, but we find out the answers to that. So it's a really clever kind of hook for a sequel right there. And yeah, it's just the 5 of them staying together. There's the sexual tension between him and Gamora, Zoe Saldana, and Chris Pratt. So many fun one-liners, so much great dialogue and interactions, the banter between these characters, and they all have tragic backstories. And so even a character like Rocket, who's easy to explain away as a comedy side character, has this kind of tragic backstory that you actually learn to care about him as more than just a raccoon, a space raccoon. Just fantastic. There's plenty of James Gunn cameos in there. Greg Henry plays, I think, young Peter Quill's uncle. I think young Peter Quill, from the very beginning of the movie, is actually Stan from Andy Muschietti's It, Volume 1, which is interesting. And then the end credit scene is kind of a throwaway. The Collector's sitting there, and you get a Howard the Duck cameo with Seth Green voicing Howard the Duck. I guess in this movie, it didn't bother me so much that it was kind of a cutesy end credit scene, because this is kind of an outlier. What are we up to? This is 11 movies in now to the MCU, and this is the first one that felt like a true outlier to the series. Every other one was about an Avenger or the Avengers coming together, and then this is just this new team that you've never met before. I think the only character from this movie that is in any of the previous films is Thanos, and you only see Thanos for that one little bit in a post-credit scene of Avengers. So this movie feels like a total outlier, and because of that, I'm not going to complain about Howard the Duck as a comedy end credit scene. But yeah, Guardians, definitely one of the better MCU films, just because it was so much of a blast to watch. Even rewatching it for the ntth time, just so much fun. I sound like a broken record, but that's it. And if you're going to make more MonsterVerse movies, maybe try making them fun. That's a good piece of advice. Next review coming up is going to be Avengers Age of Ultron. What does it finally take to get the team back together? And we'll talk about Age of Ultron. Later today, at some point, my son and I are going to be watching Ant-Man on Disney+. So stay tuned to Geeks of Doom for our Age of Ultron review, and then Ant-Man coming up soon after that. And this has been Danny, and I'll see you very soon.